Afternoon, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us here. Thank you for the people who are also watching us through streaming. And you know more or less how this works, as we did yesterday, but today is going to be a bit different. So, as I was explaining in the morning, we have all of this talent and all of this passion here in this encounter. So we decided that it was important to share and to present all of this talent. So we're going to have 4 presentations, and they're going to be short presentations of different projects that the people are joining us here have. And I'm basically going to introduce them, and they will come here on the stage and they will explain a little about their own projects. So, in the first place, the first project that we're going to see is an app application made by Mohammad S. Babah. He's one of the participants, so please, an applause for Mo.
Thank you. My name is Mohammad Babah. I am originally from Guinea-Conakry in West Africa, but I am from Amsterdam. And most importantly, I am a very, very, very shy speaker. So when I start trembling, please understand where this is coming from. Today I'm going to present to you the CityRight app. That is me. And this video will soon be part of the content in the app. So this is what you can expect from this presentation. I'm nervous, guys. Now, in this picture, it's me in Rotterdam City on the 9th of March 2020. I got a negative from the Dublin program. Most of you that are working with undocumented people must know that. And I was asked to leave the as it say. Going to Amsterdam, I had no information. I knew nobody in Amsterdam. And the only person that I was in touch with was not responding to my calls. So I had to wait in Rotterdam for over 3 hours before I could get a response and proceed from Nijmegen to Amsterdam. Information is very vital for undocumented people. Unfortunately, most of us coming from different parts of the world don't know most of the languages spoken in Europe. In the Netherlands, it is Dutch. I don't speak Dutch. And what happens is most countries have their asylum system designed in a way to make people want to go. So information is restricted and not accessible. Now, the idea of the Amsterdam CityRight app is to bridge this gap of information and make sure that undocumented people get the information that they need to have, to get the safety that they need. Again, I'm nervous. So in the CityRight app, we have 4 sections. Know Your Rights section. In the Know Your Rights section, we explain some of the laws, some of the laws that most people don't know, or most people don't have access to. So we explain, for instance, the laws of the Dublin, what to do if you are arrested, and all these kind of things, your access to healthcare and shelter. Know Your City. In Know Your City, we put information that are in different part of the city from which you can get like medical help, you can get shelter, you can get food, or support groups around you. And in the journal, the most interesting part for me, because I like information, is sort of an interactive place where information is shared among undocumented people and people that support them. So if the journal start functioning, I could post something about what I'm doing and request help from people, and they can react and get in touch. And the last but not the least, being that undocumented people are very isolated, you don't have, there is a lot of information, and most of the times you don't know where this information is. We have the calendar in which you can post an event on a specific date, and people that are interested can show up to this event. This is the illustration of the City Right app. This is the informative part. You can see healthcare, day centers, food aid, night shelters. And in Know Your Right, you can see police, healthcare again, Dublin claim, legal support, shelter, work exploitation, so on and so forth. And under the journal, you can see information that have been posted as a trial until it is functional, because the first part of the app was to make sure that the information that is needed for survival is accessible to the people who need it. And here, on that one, is a podcast that is made about me from the European podcast. It's a nice one. I recommend it. And the second one is a podcast, that was a City Right United event that we hosted in Amsterdam. Most of you were there, a wonderful one. And unfortunately, the calendar is not yet functioning, so it's not here. But if you have further questions, you can contact us and we can give you the information that you need. Now, to make this possible, we collaborated with a lot of organizations. I myself was the co-founder, but without Here to Support, Amsterdam City Right, Neighborhood Feminist, Human Aid Now, and the Builders More Interactive, this would have not been possible. Usually in Amsterdam, I would say download the app. But if you want to see how it works, you can also download it. And if you're from the Netherlands, you should definitely download it. Because then you can become an ambassador to undocumented people. And when you see someone that needs help or someone that is requesting information, you can look into the app and direct them to the place where they can get the help that they need. And if you don't ask questions, I will be offended. I'm not done yet. Any questions? I'm offended. Information all across Europe is difficult in many cities. And information is very important for survival. In Africa, we say knowledge is power. I hope this is what you say here as well. In the near future, we want to bring together activist organizations throughout Europe in a joint campaign on the City Right app for undocumented. What is this? We will try to go to cities where there is no where information is very difficult to access, and to make sure that they have a City Right app on their own, and that undocumented people do not have to suffer anymore. Do you think that is a good idea? So you should download the app. So this slide was made in a haste, and unfortunately, we put some of, okay, let's forget about that. But under the City Right family, we also have the City Right Radio, as you can see on my shirt. It's a podcast platform with the aim of representing migrants in media. And it is founded by undocumented. I am the founder with the help of the Here to Support. And basically, what happens is most of the times, mainstream media talk bad about us, or talk about us without us. So to counteract that, we started our own radio show in Amsterdam. And it's amazing. I love listening to my voice when I'm going to And if you're also in Amsterdam, unfortunately, this was not supposed to be here, but it's here. You can join our summer academy and be around undocumented people and get to know them better and be part of the solution. Thank you all. I thought I was prepared, but you can never be prepared for such things. Download the app.
Thank you very much, Mo. We didn't even notice that you were that nervous, so yeah, thank you. So let's go on with the next presentation. Julia Wernersson is going to be doing it, and she will be explaining us what is Unbias the News.
Thank you. So this is the magic stick, right? Let's see if it works. Where do I have to point it? Here, yeah. So I'm from Hostwriter and Unbias the News. So first, to introduce myself, I think you already know me by now, but my name is Julia Wernersson, and I'm the managing director of Hostwriter. It's a network of, I just checked the website and updated the numbers, 6,339, so one more and 40, so become a member. Network of journalists from now 157 countries. It was founded in 2013, and it is a network that was founded to make it easier for journalists to collaborate across borders. And what happened in 2019 was that we had a meeting with 30 of our ambassadors, and in the meeting it became very, very clear that a lot of the people in our network were very frustrated with all the barriers they face in the media. So what did we do? We published a book about it with 30 stories from all over the world. It's personal narratives about barriers in the media. Okay, that happened. Then we thought, that's not enough. The topic kept on evolving, and what did we do? We started Unbias the News as a permanent newsroom. Why did we do this? Here I have cut out half of the presentation because I thought, I don't need to preach to the choir here, you all know the problem. Communities that are underrepresented get misrepresented in the media. And right now, the media is very good at misrepresenting people. Here I also like to quote one of our founders, Tabea Grezik, who usually was making the point that we all very much agree with, that diversity in media should not be a point of a moral question. It should be a point of quality, because if you don't have a diverse media, you don't get the accurate story, you don't get the real full story of what is going on. So that's why we think actually diversity should be a question of journalistic quality. Next point. How does it look like? I mean, the panel yesterday had a lot of input already, but this is the newest statistics from the Reuters Institute of this year about top editors, percentage of non-white top editors by country, of the top editors at 100 news outlets, and you see Germany has an amazing 0%, both last year and this year. UK is the same. US is a little bit better this year than last year with 33%, and South Africa also improved. But yeah, as you could also hear in the other panel, generally it's looking pretty bad. And international media is still dominated by Western male voices. I think in general we are quite aligned about a lot of the issues, but I wanted to point out a few more things that I didn't hear yesterday. One point is that in international media, often Western media comes to a place and do reportages and journalism, and they use what is commonly known as fixers, which is usually just local journalists helping out doing the work. Our stance on this is that we need to stop to call these people fixers, but to actually recognize the journalistic work that is often done. Another curious point, I mean, I listed this because I thought these are things that are easy to fix. I mean, no newsrooms are living in a vacuum. There are a lot of things that we can't just correct. Like, we can't just correct that everyone gets visas immediately. We can't correct many of the inequalities, but these are things that are not that hard to address. Other thing is, for example, pay based on nationality. It happens kind of frequently that you have two journalists based in the same location, working on the same story, sometimes even for the same, or usually even for the same employer. I heard one story from one journalist. She was paid 85 euros. The other journalist was paid more than 1,000 euros for the same story that they were working on together. Why? Because he had a Western passport, and she did not. They were both based in the same location. So how you can have a conversation and, you know, work in an equal relationship or collaborate on an equal level with this inequality, it's just not working. Another thing is missing bylines and credits, especially then when the local journalists or fixers work on a story, they are often not credited at all, which has implications like, oh, you actually did contribute with a lot of work for this story for a larger Western newspaper, but your name is nowhere to find, which has major impacts on your career. And when later on somebody actually wins the award for the story, you don't. I also heard stories from colleagues who worked on award-winning stories, but of course, they're not anywhere credited because, yeah, they were not the white person working for the newspaper. And another thing that we also frequently come across is that people tend to hire people based on who they know and where they have published before, and not based on their pitches or the quality of their work. These are things that, you know, how hard can it be to fix it? I mean, the pay, maybe, you know, it makes a cut in the budget, but at least the byline, credit the work, come on. So we got a little bit frustrated with this situation, so we decided, okay, let's do it differently. Let's make the newsroom that we want to see. So what did we do? We set up an international remote editorial team with members from Egypt, Nigeria, India, Philippines, USA, Venezuela, and Pakistan. And we select the pitches according to group-developed criteria and really based on the pitches and the work samples people pitches rather than who they know, which means we work with a lot of people we never met. We don't know who they are, but we see their samples and they deliver great work. And we do training and networking. Our principles are collaboration as default. So all the decisions are taken together in this geographically diverse group. And we make sure stories don't favor Western perspective or common biases and stereotypes. We don't do parachute journalism, obviously. It's often a requirement that a local journalist write about local communities. And yeah, we promote cross-border storytelling, basically. We have more principles, but this was what fit on this slide. So and I just wanted to make a few comments to some of our stories so you have an idea about what we publish. So this was the first story we did run. It's about vaccine hesitancy. It's about the Kano state in Nigeria, and two journalist students wrote this piece, which they interviewed survivors of the Pfizer trial of the 1990s, when Pfizer tried a measles vaccine in the Kano state, and where several kids died and became disabled. Obviously now, in Corona times, the people didn't really trust anymore the same company to come and vaccinate them that basically killed their children not 10 years ago, I'm not living in the 20,000s, but a while ago. And we found it very important to publish this story because it has a different narrative than what was at the time what you could see in the media was more like, oh, in Africa, people are superstitious because of religious reasons, they don't want to vaccinate, but sometimes there is real, clear reasons for why you wouldn't take the vaccine, and when you communicate with these people, you need to address that. This story was published in 4 different local Nigerian newspapers at the same time, and we even got feedback from the UN that they will incorporate these thoughts in their communication strategy. So I think that was a really great success for us as the first story coming out. I hope I'm not going to run over time, am I? No. Great. Another story I wanted to highlight is this one because it's a personal narrative. We also do personal narratives. It's from a blind journalist from Australia, originally from, I forgot, but I think the Philippines. But she writes about her experiences of about getting help without asking for it, non-consensual help, and about how the Me Too movement gave her the vocabulary to understand what she herself felt and how to express the vulnerability of not being able to see and people just grabbing her, taking her around, and her experience of actually being assaulted as well. And this piece got later on republished in Braille and resonated really well with the blind Indian community because White Mag is a Braille magazine, published it in India. So it was a great piece that did spark a lot of reactions from the blind community and also across borders. Then we do also quite a lot of pieces on the actual media landscape. I wanted to highlight this one. It's from a Canadian journalist who outlines very detailed her experiences of working for the Canadian public broadcaster. She was a diversity hire, so to say. She was hired to cover stories that would be important for the marginalized, I don't know, like for different communities than the white people. But she describes really, really clearly in detail how she then was blocked to do the work she was actually hired to do. And how also all her stories that she proposed were still judged against the backdrop of how would this be interesting for a white guy living in the prairie, which was their idea of their actual audience. So, very great story. I recommend you to read it. Same with this one that just came out. It's from a journalist from Namibia, Nampa. She writes about her experiences of Western journalists mining for stories in Africa and how basically disrespectfully treated she has been in different situations, also working on this very in this very piece, she's detailing also working on a piece for a Western outlet about decolonization in Africa, and then still their working process was completely disrespectful. I also encourage you to read it. Afterwards, we had Twitter spaces about it and had a lot of reactions also from African journalists who could really resonate with this constant disrespect. I also recommend you to listen into that if you would feel like. Yeah, and another type of story I just wanted to highlight is also we try to do also stories that are, we don't do breaking news, right? We do kind of slow stories. And one of the stories that we wanted to highlight was Syrian journalists did pitch to us a story about the environmental effects of the war and what the war actually have done to the possibilities to grow food and agriculture long term in Syria. It's also a great piece. A few words on how we actually reach our audiences. I mean, we started publishing in June last year, so we're about 1 year old. So our actual audience who read our pieces only is pretty small. But we do have quite a big reach because we collaborate with a lot of different newsrooms, particularly in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, who republishes our stories and to reach local audiences. And we also have free training and networking. If you feel like participating in any of our events, we have monthly events, like, for example, freelancers as entrepreneurs, fact-checking for journalists, or reporting in conflict zones. Yeah, one last word about our next, 1 more minute, okay, I'm gonna be super fast. Our next project is coming out in September, and it's an environmental investigation in 5 sinking cities in different parts of the world, where we have gotten local journalists to collaborate about why cities still continue to develop housing and cities on places they know will be unsafe. So this is coming out soon, and I'm going to be super, super quick and just say thank you all for listening to my talk. And I don't get offended if you don't have questions, but you can ask me questions later. Just catch me. I'm here for another day. The magic stick. The magic stick.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Julia. It was amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. So we have the next presentation. Queen Yakovenko is going to be doing it, and she's going to be talking about the media Afrocolectiva.
Hola.
Hello.
Speaking in English. I don't. Bueno. Ay, no, spoiler. Well, let me start presenting myself. I'm Queen Yakovenko. I'm a Nigerian girl. I was born in African diaspora. I was born here in Spain, and I've grew up all my life here in Spain, but I recognize myself as a Nigerian girl. I'm going to present to you Afrocolectiva, that is media. Who are we? Sorry, it's in Spanish, I'm sorry. But I'll be traducing. Who are we? Afrocolectiva is a media that has anti-racist and Afrofeminist and also Pan-Africanist view. It's conformed by women and people of marginalized genders, and we are all over the world. We are in Colombia, in the Andean zone, we are in the USA, we are also here in Spain, and we hope we can be in many more places of the world soon. Our aim is to conform a media that fight against every form of injustice and structural violence. So this is our slogan. Our existence is resistance. And why do we say this? We say this because the only fact that we are alive today, that we have to bear all this structural violence against not only black women, but migrant black women, because we have migrants in our media. All these forms of violence that are perpetuated to us, and the fact that we are able to still keep going on every day is like a motive to celebrate our existence here. And not only because in the present we are here, but because our ancestors did fight for us to be able to consume, to see, to hear, to enjoy our cultures, because there has been many attempts on erasure of identity, on that's colonialism, through colonialism, no, and many other instruments, for us not to see it like in the present. And for us is a motive of celebration that our ancestors did resist for us just to see and celebrate ourselves today. We say that we are because they were, no, like Ubuntu, and that's something very important to us. And without that, we cannot function. Well, I present the coordination of Afrocolectiva. This is the general coordination. Carolina Benitez is based in Colombia. Our communication coordination, that is Anna. This is me kissing her there. Like this picture was took here. This is Europe coordination. I don't know if you know who this is, but yeah, it kind of looks like me. And this is North America and the Caribbean, Thiwapa, the Andean Zone, Evelyn, and the South American Zone, Alejandra. In Afrocolectiva, we have two roles. That is the coordination, which I just presented to you, and the membership. The coordinations have the responsibility to contact, inform, and also to manage the administrative aspect of the collective. But we also have the membership, and it's opened, just in case you want to join, that are people who make part of the collective and also make content, but because it's a media, it's not only a newspaper, but it's also the constructive media. So we do have many content in our social networks, and we have to like generate content. So yeah. We work by regions. Now in Europe, we have Spain, we have France too, but in the US, in America we have the US, and then we have the Caribbean zone, and then we have the South American zone, and we work in regions because that's the only way we can really contextualize everything we see in the news to generate quality content. So we have the newspaper, and then we have our social networks. The newspaper now is only online for the moment, but we hope that we can make it paper very soon. So this is our socials. This is Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And I'm going to present to you a bit of the content we do, just for you to know what we do. I don't know if everyone knows the word mulata. It's very used here in Spain. Vale. Just for you to know, ¿vale? The word mulata is used to refer to people who are biracial, okay? But it's not biracial. The traduction is not biracial. Literally, the word mulata comes from donkey. So, donkey is a merge between a horse and a donkey, and then comes mulata. And in Spain, it's a very normalized term that they used to call biracial people. So in this image, we just say that it's a colonial insult, and it's not right to say mulata. There are many terms like this in Spanish, like many racist terms that we used to señalar, point at in our socials. Bueno, then we have memes or memes. Okay, here it says, when you finally go out with the black person you liked and he, she, they say that you should not speak about racism because that was something from slavery. That was, and then Then, when there is a new series in Netflix or wherever, and the main character is Afro, and then when it only he only reproduce stereotypes about black people. Bye bye. Or this is me. This is my group of black friends, and this is racist people. This is the best one for me. Like, okay, it starts talking about racism only perpetuates. Talking about race only perpetuates racism. You start painting your face. We are only one race, the human race. You start coloring the face. I don't see colors, I see people. And then to end, we are all Afro-descendant. Africa literally is the queen of the humanity. Everybody comes from Africa. We also talk about Africa on a geographic manner, because there is also this infraposition and shrinking of the African continent. And many more. You can just check it out in our socials. But we have to the newspaper. It's not paper, the newspaper, but online newspaper. Yeah. And, for example, we have this, the last 3 articles we just wrote. One about, this was yesterday, the 60-year independence of the Algerian people through, after 132 years of colonization, of French colonization. Then considerations you should have in mind of cultural appropriation. This is for white people. Please, white people, read it. And also el manifiesto, what we wrote from our communities about the Melilla massacre that just happened on the 24th of June. Just for you to know, our handle is Afrocolectiva. You can search Twitter and TikTok by Afrocolectiva, but Instagram is Afrocolectiva, because Afrocolectiva was already took. so our Instagram is Afrocolectiva. You can take a picture if you want, just, yes. If you want, you can take a picture and then search for it. Yes, thank you. But that's not all. We have the newspaper, we have our socials, but we also have our book reading club. This book reading club is made for us to know each other more in the collective, and also to be able to contribute to our anti-racist and Afro-feminist education through books of people that write books. No, we are now with Islamic feminisms, and it's very interesting. So I present this to you because I consider this very interesting. If you want to join the collective, it's open. You have to be black or of color, of course, and you have to be a woman or someone from a marginalized gender, okay? And we as a collective, we function with many dynamics. No, one of the dynamics is getting to know each other, and to secure that as a working space, we don't generate toxic dynamics, because something we often forget is that, okay, it's okay to have like a safe space, like an anti-racist space or feminist space, but we have to look at the dynamics we make in those spaces, because sometimes we don't really know, but we might hurt someone by how we work. No. So this reading club is one of the mechanisms we use to make that work. And thank you. We also have many videos with so many content. I'm a nurse too, so I do like medical content on Black people. I also appear dancing in the app because I'm a dancer too. So if you want to check it out, just check it out, and every support is welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Quindi. So let's go with the last presentation. Malik Gray is going to be doing it, and he's going to be talking about Pantera.
Hello. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be invited to this type of spaces, in these places, in order to explain our work. We are a collective, a very invisibilized collective. They don't usually invite us. So we are always very grateful when we are invited to these type of spaces. This is Pantera. The Pantera is a trademark that we created from the Union of Street Vendors in Madrid. The Street Vendor Collective started in the 2000s, where there was an association, which was the Undocumented People Association. And what we did at that time was try and try to claim the rights of the struggle against the migration laws. Those of you who know Madrid in 2006, here there were a lot of racist raids. You would be in the streets and they would constantly stop you because you were a racialized person. So we started fighting at that time, because here in Spain we are very much criminalized when we are street vendors. For example, many of us, some of the street vendors were even in jail because of street vending, basically. So 2 years ago, when the COVID pandemic started, the people who work in street vending, they couldn't earn any money because it was an informal economy. So there was, but in our collective, we work through mutual support. We always support each other. We always try and support each other, because when you live in a society that constantly criminalizes you, when you have racist laws like the laws in Spain, the migration laws in Spain, you only survive thanks to mutual support with your community, with your brothers, with your friends. So we created this way of supporting each other, and we realized that we had to go beyond this. We needed our own economy. We created this like resistance, box of resistance, because we had the support of many white people also, but we wanted to be independent. We wanted to have our own economy. And at that time, we thought, okay, we're going to create our own trademark in order to sell our own products. With everything you can see here in the shop is what we sell. This is in Lavapiés, in the Mandela Square. For us, this was really important, because in Madrid, the first Senegalese migrants that arrived in Madrid, that lived precisely there, in this square. So if you know the neighborhood of Lavapiés, for example, in the 80s, when the first African people arrived here, when police stopped black people, they took them directly there to the square, and they left them there because they thought that was their place. So we wanted to vindicate this space, which is a space that is our space, and we wanted to create an anti-racist space in the Mandela Square. So we organize also many acts, many events in this square, many anti-racist events. So why Pantera? Why Panther? Why this name for this trademark? Well, when we were debating about how we would do this trademark, there was some of us wanted Pantera, and some of us wanted to call it resistance. But then we realized we're tired of resisting this society with its racist laws. We're always forced to resist. If you don't resist, you don't exist, you don't live. So in the end, we decided, okay, we want to stop we want to go beyond resistance. That is why we created the Pantera trademark. The name Pantera, Panther, is really important because of the story of the resistance of black people in the 60s in the US, the Black Panthers. So what the Black Panthers did was to create a community. They wanted to create their own community, their own economy, and they created a communitarian breakfast, communitarian lunch, and what we don't do that, but what we try and do is that try and support each other in our own community also in order to survive these racist laws that we have in Spain. So, okay, we decided Panther is the name for this trademark, and the idea is not only to sell T-shirts. This is okay, but we want that everything that we sell has to do with anti-racism, because this is what is interesting for us. We want to create an anti-racist space where anti-racist collectives feel it's their own. This is why each T-shirt has an important meaning. They have different messages, and this was really important for us. It's not only something that we want to sell, but it's something that we identify with. We want to identify with that what we are selling. So we opened this shop a year ago, and there's 12 of us. And those who work are also learning to sew, to design, because we also do our own designs. For example, the collective in Madrid of the Union of Street Vendors is people that are still street vending. There's activists. There's people that work in, they have another job. But we all work together in order to support each other, in order that everybody has an opportunity to fight somehow against the criminalization of street vendors in Spain. Because, for example, in the media, when people speak about street vending, it's always white people who are speaking about us, and they create these fictions about the life of street vendors, and this is all false. They only want to criminalize us. This happens in Madrid all the time. For example, when there was when in the Madrid we had a city council that was a leftist city council, it was the same thing. They criminalized people who were street vending, and they always wanted to justify this morally. They would say, well, they're a mafia, that is why we have to go after them. This is a moral justification, but it's not true. We are a collective, that we support each other because this is the only way we can survive. But they always criminalize us. They always create these fictions about our life that have nothing to do with what our lives are. And this is directly related to racism. And they don't think we are, for example, capable of organizing. They think that in an autonomous way. They think it's mafia that organizes us. And this is racism, basically. But we are self-organized. The first migrants that arrived in Madrid, in Spain, they always they supported each other, they self-organized. It was the only way to survive, basically, against these racist laws. So, well, for us, this T-shirts that we can see here, it was from Mexico, 1968, from the Olympics. This is a really important T-shirt for us, for the Black people struggle. So in this one, we have our blanket with our street vending elements. And we were criticized because they said, you're promoting street vending. And no, we know it's an activity that doesn't dignify our life. Someone that is always in the streets, running every time the police goes after them. This is not a dignified job, but we have to do it because that is the only way of surviving sometimes. And in the union, in the street vending union in Barcelona, here, what we want is trying to have a more dignified life, a decent life. We want to fight against these racist laws, these migration laws that don't allow us to live, to study. When migrant people migrate, they are always having all these obstacles and all these burdens. So it's very hard to survive, to live. So in Pantera, what we do is we struggle to have our own communitary economy. And this shop and this trademark, we did it ourselves. We have no support. No party supports us. No institution supports us. We only do it with the support of anti-racist collectives and us, our own work. And this is the idea. We want to continue working. We want to continue, for example, training other people from the collective. We want to learn to sew. We want to design, to learn, to give opportunities to our brothers, to our friends, to the people from the collective in order to have a decent life and fight against the racist laws like the migration laws in Spain. And I don't know if I have to say anything else. Well, basically, thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, Malik. English, yeah. Sorry. So the next thing we're going to do is that we will have the second panel of this. Well, it's the first panel today, but it's the second one into the Decolonizing the Newsroom encounter, and it's going to be hosted by Moha Gerehou.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Hello. Hi, everyone. Okay, so we are about to start. We need just 3 or 4 minutes to fix all the microphones and to change the things. So if you want to grab something, this is the moment, but we just have like 3 minutes, so you have to do it quickly. If you want to go to the restroom or something, we have 3 minutes, and then we come back with the roundtable. So see you right now. Hola, hola, have a seat. We are about to start. Sira, come on, have a seat. Felipe, have a seat, please. I'm the police of the seats. The sitting police. Bueno, voy a hacer la presentación en castellano. Así que para la gente de la traducción.
Okay, I'm going to speak in Spanish. So welcome everyone to this table, to this round table. I am so happy to moderate, to have this conversation. When we were planning this encounter, when we had this idea, the whole group agreed that this was a really interesting conversation, and especially from a journalism perspective. The idea is journalism in war times, and we thought that in a context in which we're thinking of decolonizing relations and introducing new narratives, it would be really interesting to speak about this, to have different voices, different perspective. And thinking about this, we were thinking about, well, we think about the massacre in Melilla that happened a week ago. Many of those who died or who were suffering a terrible situation and trying to getting to Spain, the door of Europe, as they say. Many of them can't even ask for asylum, even if they were fleeing from a war, and they are only received by police, by walls, who are waiting for them and not precisely with their arms open. So this can be read in many ways, but also from journalism, we have to think, how do we speak about war? How do we narrate war? How do we speak about the consequences, especially about migration, about the effects on families, on people who have their kids, their parents, etc., their families, and whose stories sometimes we speak about maybe like statistics, sometimes with negative stereotypes, and in general, in a way that doesn't do justice to their lives. So it is very important to have these conversations and to listen to different voices about the situation, and from here try and reflect. And I don't know if here, but maybe in the other spaces that we have in this encounter, we can think, how can we transform this journalism? How can we transform this regard? How do we speak about war? And how can we speak in a more honest way, in a more transparent way, in a more fair way, without speaking with racist stereotypes? As you know, I'm a modern person, so I wrote my notes in my mobile phone. I didn't use a paper. Next week, I'll be 30. Oh, so am I. You? Oh, no way. Our birthday's the same day. Wow. The 13th of July. Wow, this is incredible. 92. Wow, well, this is a great way to start. Okay. So, on my right, we have Polina Moroz, who was born in Ukraine and is living in Paris at the moment. She studied art and architecture, and she has earned many different prizes, and it is interesting to hear her voice. So please applaud her, Polina. Also on my right, we have Babah Tarawally, who I thought he was from Gambia, because it's a very common surname in Gambia, but he comes from Sierra Leone. He lives in the Netherlands, and he wrote the book, The Lost Hunt, in which he spoke about the experience of those who seek asylum and their problems to overcome the traumas that are generated in this process. So please applaud Babah. My left, we have Okba. I didn't want to invite him, but in the end I said, oh, okay. Nah, I'm joking. Okba is a Syrian journalist. He worked there as a journalist several years, and now he's living in Madrid and has founded Bayanana, a media founded by Syrian journalists. We spoke about it yesterday, and he's one of the founders. And he also works with El País and Público. So please applaud Okba. And the other left, we have Margaryta Yakovenko. She's a journalist. She was born in Ukraine. She came to Spain when she was really young, and now she's working for the newspaper El País and some other media, also La Sexta, the TV. And she wrote this book, Desencajada. I hope she continues to write. And please, an applause for Margaryta. Now we're going to start. We don't have so much time. We're several people. So we speak about journalism in war times. But we're not only going to speak about journalism, we're going to speak about our different perspectives. But I think it would be interesting to speak about, because yesterday we spoke about racialized women in the media. So today maybe it's interesting to think, what is it to be a journalist, an artist, with a migrant background, who works, who speaks about war in different contexts? I think this is a good question in order to start speaking. I'm going to point out to you. So let's start with Margaryta. So what it's hard is to be a journalist in war times when the country that is in war is where you were born, where your family is still there. So as a journalist, this is very hard because you always hope you will never speak about your own country suffering a war, and to speak about the story of victims, and those victims are your grandparents, your cousins, your uncle, your aunt, that are still there. This is a very, very complex process. The war started 4 months ago. At the beginning, there was this craze about the war was in every newspaper. This lasted a month and a half, 2 months. It's true, more than other wars, but after this, it's forgotten, basically. And what is hard is that journalists come and go, but your family stays there, and you still have to confront every day reading this news and learning what they are saying, and knowing that the world is not interested, because we're tired of seeing children fleeing or bombs, because it's uncomfortable for the West, for people who are having breakfast and have to listen to this uncomfortable news when they're having their coffee in the morning. But journalism is exactly that. We want them to be uncomfortable and to know what is happening in the world. And I like this concept. For example, when they say, summer is coming, so let's do light topics. We're not going to speak about hunger in the world. We speak about, for example, a heat wave. Yes, it's summer. It's obvious there would be heat waves. So any artist is something that is covered by the news, light topics. And this is very, very painful. You said it before that you spoke about it yesterday. I wasn't here yesterday. I would have loved to be here, but this thing about the newsrooms. Before you asked me, do you work in El País or do you collaborate in El País? No, I work. In fact, I am probably one of the few migrants that works in El País. And I remember when I arrived 3 years ago, they asked me, the first question they asked me is, are you the daughter of diplomats? Because nobody thought that my parents could be my economic migrants and that I could be there in a newsroom working with journalists from here. So they always assume that if you're a migrant, you're never going to get there. Whoa, what a starting point. It's not the best. So I am going to ask the question to Polina. Polina, how is it to be an artist in war times with what's going on in Ukraine?
It's a difficult question. I must say that there's not much inspiration, and that's what artists thrive on. I mean, for the past 4 months, what I've been doing, I've been trying to highlight the situation from a Ukrainian point of view, because I'm living in France, and it's very, I can see very strong narratives planted by Russian media in the society, which doesn't reflect the reality. And so that's has been my focal point within the context you asked. And what I realized is that it is very hard not to be objectified and not to be, as we call, westplaned, because the history, we have a complex history, but the media portrays what is going on in a very plain way. So, I mean, I'm still doing it. I'm still trying to bring more awareness because this is the history repeating itself over and over again. But it's not, I mean, I can't say that I've done my work fully.
Gracias, Polina. Pues ahora te traslado a ti.
Thank you, Polina. Now I ask the same question to Okba. He did this documentary film that is called The European Dream, which is about Pantera, and it's in YouTube. You can see it. El Sueño Europeo, The European Dream from Bainana. It's really interesting. It's well produced. And by the way, I am in it also. So if you're interested, it seemed as if I was doing an ad for you, and it was for me. Okay, getting back. We're speaking about important things. So as a journalist that has been working here and speaking about the war in Syria, how is it to be a journalist trying to speak about a war that, as Marga was saying, the war in Ukraine is losing interest? Imagine the Syrian war. What is the situation now? And as a journalist, well, first, before responding to your question, I would like to give a little bit of context about journalism in Syria. In Syria, there are 800 journalists and people who work in media that have lost their lives working as journalists. I started working in Syria as a journalist when I was 17 because we were forced to do journalism somehow in the war. Young people and journalists in Syria were basically people that needed to speak about what was going on in Syria. So we were like forced journalism somehow. Imagine there's a war. So in every village, in every city, there are many things going on every day. So if we have to wait for a journalist to arrive and cover it, well, it is impossible. It is impossible to cover everything that is going on. So what we did is that, for example, me, like many others, we became journalists. And we started to work as journalists to cover what was going on in Syria. So we were living the war and covering the war. So now in Syria, I am afraid that maybe you are not going to understand it very well. And this is also, the media is to blame because it's difficult to understand what's going on now if we haven't understood what came before, and because it hasn't been covered, it's a little bit difficult. But in Syria today, the most complicated thing going on, the conflict is international. There are many players, Russia, Iran, Turkey, the United States. Every country has their army. There are many battles. For example, in the north of Syria today, Russian airplanes attacked a city in the north of Syria. And last week they attacked the city. Russia attacks this city sometimes because it's the opposition that is occupying that city there with Turkey and Islamic groups. So it is always subject of Russian attacks. In my city, Dara, this is where the Syrian revolution started in 2012. There's a different type of war that started in 2018 when we left, and this was a battle that lasted 21 days, and that Russia started and in the end controlled the city. In the end we left because we couldn't stay there because they would kill us, or we would be jailed, or else we would be forced to participate in the Ukraine war taken by Russia. And now in Syria, there's different groups with different ideologies, with different objectives. They're attacking each other, and every day there are many people dying, 2 or 3 people. Today there was 4 people were assassinated, and probably if I open the news, there are 2 or 3 more because it's constant. People are always dying, and okay. So from your perspective as a Syrian who left, but to live it as a journalist, how do you feel? How do you feel with the frustration of not being able to tell what's going on? Well, I feel guilty because I am living in Spain, and in Bainana we are working on Syria. We work on migrations and refugees in Spain. So it's very hard to live in 2 places, in 2 countries at the same time, and follow the 2 situations at the same time. For example, migrations in Spain and the Syrian war in Syria. It is complicated. It is psychologically it's very complicated because you were not only working as a journalist and covering what was going on there from here, with the difficulty of the language, of contacting with media, etc., but also that the fact that you have your family there and you always receive all these terrible news. For example, last year, my 2 cousins and my 2 best friends were assassinated. And there are always bad news. Every single day there's bad news. So you have your situation here in this country, and then the situation in your country. This is terrible. So now, Babah, it's the same thing. You also spoke about the consequences of people that leave their countries, be it because of war or other situations. And as a journalist, as a writer, how do you feel this? How do you speak about this? How do you write about this?
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here, to be among these recent victims of war, because my war is almost 25 years ago, 24 years ago. So when I hear this news, of the attack on Ukraine, I wrote a column about it, telling the European Union, telling the EU that war is not a child's play. Don't go there. You've been hearing about war perhaps 80 years ago, Second World War, and the war in Yugoslavia a bit, but the war is coming closer. Get negotiation instead of going to hardcore war. Because when you're a victim of war, you will never be the same again. You will never be the same again. So my fear as a journalist, as a columnist, I wrote about it. But at that time, people or politicians, they just thought it is an easy thing. We can just go in and perhaps nothing happens. And during the war in Sierra Leone, before I came to Holland, we had 7-8 years of war. Nobody talks about it. The war was just there. Even when I came to Europe, my story of war was not believed. You know, there was no media attention on the war in Sierra Leone. And that was a different type of war, because when you come here as a victim of war and nobody believes you, it's very painful. You know, so you go through that, and I spent 7 years in the asylum procedure, not believing that there is war in Sierra Leone, and that war there's a distance. And you live with war, and you hear, just like what my comrade said, friends killed. I had the same thing. Most of my friends, good friends, were killed, were slaughtered. And that remains with you. That trauma of war will never go away. And it has defined my writing, it has defined the way I see the world, and it makes me also very resistant, you know, because we all know where the war is coming from. Last week, I wrote a column in the Dutch newspaper, the Tarawally. I'm a columnist, and I wrote that what was in slavery, sugar, which was the reason why the Europeans went to have slaves, because of sugar. Sugar was the addiction of the West. They were addicted on sugar. So when scarcity of sugar, they went to take slaves from Africa. It's the same thing with oil and gas. So I made a comparison, which many people were shocked that I made that comparison, because some people did not see it coming, comparing sugar as addictive thing to oil and gas, which we, the West, now have been addicted on. So I compared that this war also in Syria, in Iraq, Kuwait, all is about war and gas and the European addiction. And I also said, you give weapons and you get refugees. So you see the difference. You give weapons to fight war, and what you get back is refugees. So why are you complaining that we have refugees here? Thank you. So you facilitate it, and you get response. So we are talking about, we are the victims, but there is an agenda behind we becoming the victim. We don't need to be here. We don't need to be here. So as a columnist, as a journalist, sometimes it's difficult, I can understand. It's difficult to be neutral, especially when it is your own country, a place where your family is, your friends are. You can't be neutral. You have to take a position. And also, your whole world, your people are expecting you to be the representation of Ukraine in that media house. Also for Syrian, you are the embodiment of the whole Syria community. So you have a big of responsibility on your shoulder. So how do you relate as a journalist in that? And in my situation, I notice that every day when there is problem about Sierra Leone, problem about war, problem about racism and discrimination, I am that embodiment. I need to bring the news out. I have a responsibility to bring that news out. So that will never go away. And that even brings my journalism into conflict as a neutral person. I can't be neutral when my own people are being slaughtered, when my country is in disaster. And in my case, I know where the source is coming from. So the anger, the activism, all has to do with that. So the question will be also, can a journalist be an activist? My answer has always been yes. That's why I call myself an independent press activist. You know, because I know I cannot be neutral. I cannot see injustice, war, and I play the role of the journalist, and I try to be in that whole neutral role to say, you know. So I don't know whether my colleagues here will relate to that. So, yep.
Bueno, ya.
Well, Babah posed the question, so we will ask the question to the table. First of all, okay, they can accuse you of being an activist, of taking part, of having a clear position, and that you should be objective as a journalist. How do you live with these ideas? Well, they can accuse you, and they accuse me. Basically, they assume that I am going to be in favor of Ukraine, and that everything that I write is not neutral. But how can I be taking part with that who is bombing my country? It's nonsense. It has no sense at all. When the war started, there was a moment in the newspaper in which I understood Russian, the Spanish, and Ukraine, and they used it as a translator from here, but they didn't think that I would be able to go to Ukraine because they wouldn't think I would be a neutral journalist. They didn't think I would be an objective journalist and inform correctly. So this is interesting because when we speak about feminism, everybody knows that it is a woman has to write. Or when we speak about racism, it can't be a white man, for example. So I can't speak about Ukraine, but if something happens in Cuenca, in a small city in Spain, they can't send someone from Cuenca. So what's up with this? So I suffered the same thing as he was speaking. It's not that I was thinking I am too much as an activist. What I care about is the life of people. So if in the end I am achieving more things as an activist than as a journalist, well, I leave the journalist part aside. Yes, but you have the same feeling as him, or your case is a little bit different? Okba. Well, you have to respond this. Well, in a summary, if you can. Well, a month ago, in a media of the Syrian regime, they wanted information about us, and they paid 1,000 euros to get information about us because we published an information that that was delicate. So this is a very complex thing because sometimes we are speaking about things, for example, concepts. Is this a terrorist? Is it a rebel? No, we speak in these terms. So it is, for someone, it might be easy to write about rebels and not terrorists. For example, I was writing for a media here in Spain, and they said, I want to speak about terrorists here. I know people who live there, and if you speak about him, about this person that is living there as a terrorist, you are going to put him in a dangerous situation. And the newspaper said, no, we don't want to be accused of being in favor of them, so we have to speak about terrorists. But you as a newspaper, it's complicated because maybe you want to write about rebels, and then they say, okay, we don't want your article because we want to speak about terrorists. And Polina, sometimes when you speak through your art about topics that maybe they may accuse you of being an activist, because Is this true? Are you sometimes accused of being an activist through your artwork?
But so far it has been portrayed in a positive way because I belong to the generation of an independent Ukraine. I just turned 32. I participated. I've been to all the revolutions that have been happening, but I think that the revolution that happened in 2014 that led, in a way, to what is happening now in Ukraine. It was the first one where young people who are now creating the agenda took an active part, and not because they were told to, but because we felt like we wanted to change something and to show our stance. So in this way, I mean, it's hard for me to imagine how an activist could be portrayed as a negative, have a bad connotation to it. But I also think, in response to the previous answers, that in certain ways there is just one truth that needs to be addressed. And I want to talk about one of the narratives that Russian media is spreading a lot, which is very, very harmful. Is they're trying to say that everything is non-ambiguous, that we don't really know the truth of what is happening. We don't really know. Maybe Ukraine was calling for that to happen, or maybe Ukraine did something to provoke this attack. But in certain situations, like the one in Syria, I'm sure there's just one truth, that the attack shouldn't have happened in the first place. And I think people sometimes need to be reminded, because I see even among my friends very conscious people who try to also be activists. Sometimes they don't understand that, or they propose alternative ideas on why what is happening takes place. So I think it's important also to take sometimes a firm stand to call bad things bad things.
Breve y así paso.
Very quickly, please. In Syria, for example, sometimes the camera or journalism doesn't work, because when there's a massacre in your village or with your family, you can't take your camera and go and film it. Many times we left the cameras and we decided not to do journalism in order to help, especially when there's people that you know, your neighbors, your family. So many times you can't be a journalist when it's happening in your own village with your own family. Babah, I'm not going to ask you the same question that you asked. What I'm going to ask you is what you write about in this second book that you wrote, that I think is really interesting, and it's one of the consequences of the war, both covering it and living it. And this has to do with the consequences on mental health. This is something that we speak more and more in society, but it's maybe not incorporated in this perspective. This mental health of people that migrate, that are fleeing from war, that spend years in the way fleeing from war. So what do you have to tell us about this?
Thank you for coming back to that book, The Verloren Hand in Dutch. That means the lost hand. The title says it itself, because Sierra Leone was known for amputations, cutting hands of victims. Because the rebels, when they catch somebody, they will cut your hands. And the reason they gave for that is that they thought when they cut the hands, you cannot vote in the election that was coming. So they cut hands. So I was wondering why you cut hand of a 2 years old, a year old they don't vote, why do you cut their hands? For me as a writer of fiction and non-fiction, I had my own interpretation. That is also the power of the writer. I was thinking this is not about voting. I thought it was ritual. Because the person who was giving that order to cut hands, I thought this person was looking for a special hand. And that special hand, when you get it, it will lead you to nirvana. Anything you want in this world will happen. Something like a ritualist way of thinking. So that's what I defined when I interpreted that book about the missing hands. So this general who gave the order to cut hands, he get the hands back in bags. They bring it to him, and he take them out, he look at it. Then he has a painting of a hand his father left for him. When you find that hand, anything you do, you get benefit from it. It is weird for Western perspective to think this way. But for an African, in this type of thinking is something which happens. So he take the hands, he look at it, he look at the painting. If it's not the same, he throw it away. Until he found that, he thought he would find the hand. He never found the hand. So when he came to Holland, he got married, and he got a daughter. And that hand he was looking for, that daughter had it. His own daughter had the hand. So the question in the book was, is he going to cut the hand of his own daughter? So what happened, the girl was 2 or 3 years, and the girl was playing, and she lost her hand. Somebody came and cut the hand and disappeared. So the whole book was about searching for who did that. That is one part of the story. Because this is about what you do comes back to you. But the next part of it, about this fellow hand, the missing hand, is about forgiveness and reconciliation. Victims and perpetrators that meet each other in this country. For example, Syria, Ukraine, and Russia, you will see victims and perpetrators, they come here and they meet each other. What happens when you meet somebody who has killed your family, who cut their hands? So it happens also in that book. So the trauma of war, people come here, and it remains with them. That psychological impact. Sometimes we don't see it, but it is there. And how do you relate? What do we do about it? I could remember when we came to Holland, we had a lot of people from Somalia and Yugoslavia in the time. A lot of people. And you see the impact 10 years later. 10 years later. And then we ask ourselves, why this guy don't work? Why they don't work? We give them paper, asylum seekers, they don't work. They just sit down there. Then I always tell people, try to know the point of departure, where that person comes from. Where I live in Utrecht, under me there is a Syrian family living there. This man, every morning he comes out of his house, he leans on his veranda, he just starts looking. Every morning when I go to work, I see him. Then what I did, I came to him, I said, I see every morning you're sitting down here, dressed, well dressed. He dressed every morning, but he don't work. He dressed every morning, he stand, and as if he's going to work. But because the neighborhood, we don't see each other, we just look, but we don't see. There is a difference between looking and seeing. So when we live among ourselves, we need to see each other, to have that connection, to really see what is happening with your neighbor. So I was able to see this guy. I went to him and asked him the question. He said, you are the first person asking me this question. He said, in Syria, I was somebody, but in this country, I'm nobody. I wake up in the morning, I want to work. I don't have a job. I can't work. And the war is in his head. The war is treating him. So, so this is a typical example of somebody who thinks he's going to do something, he can't do anything. And the whole society, people around him, they stereotype him. And that war is really affecting the man. So this is something which, in a psychological term, we should put more attention on victims of war. We should really put more attention. Let's try to be seeing each other instead of just looking at somebody and just making as if that person doesn't exist. So in my book, it's something which I'm talking about. And the whole thing of forgiving and reconciliation is something which I got from the Ubuntu philosophy, which my sister there was talking about. The African philosophy of Ubuntu, I am because we are. That you can only be a human being when you accept that other people are human beings. If you don't accept that, then you treat people as not human beings. And that's the reason how slavery started. In order to enslave Africans, they need to declare Africans, black people, as not humans. And when that was accepted, then they can take them as slaves. So you have to see each other as human beings. And I get emotional talking about this. But anyway, this is the reality of life. This is my reality. And the question you pose is very important. Psychosocial. We should not underestimate it. Because if we don't do anything about it, it will catch us. Because we are all into this together. Let me leave it there.
Wow.
I think that's something that is very interesting that the war in Ukraine brought, and also from the perspective of this table, is what is the responsibility of the media, what is the role of the media when we are trying to build solidarity. For example, the fact that at a certain moment we can be in solidarity with the victims of a conflict and not with another conflict. What is the role of the media in all of this? There are many levels, obviously. There's the European responsibility, the European Union responsibility, but also the responsibility of media. What is the role they are playing and for this to happen? Yes, clearly in this war, media is reproducing the same discourse that the European Union is reproducing. The European Union knows that they are also responsible for this war, but because they didn't act when they had to act, in the end they decide to send weapons, and now they do take in refugees. It's the first time that the European Union is receiving refugees. They're changing laws. Apparently, it was not so complicated to receive people because they changed them in 1 week, these laws of these refugees laws. What happens? Well, there's a discourse that the media is reproducing all the time that is, these people are like us. Why? Because they're white. They wear the same jackets that we do. They dress as we do, so they are the same as us. Imagine it could happen to you tomorrow. They look exactly like you, and they are blonder, and they have even bluer eyes. So they seem that we have to welcome them. This discourse is against the rest of the asylum seekers that have been seeking asylum for many, many years and who have been ignored for years. And this goes against them. And also, it creates this perception, the social perception, that they think that, well, maybe Ukrainians don't deserve it either. So why this politics of welcoming these people so suddenly? So we always have to look up and look for, don't blame those who are down, but blame those who are up. No. Then we have the media speaking about other refugees, and they speak with all these negative words. When they speak about Ukraine, they are not speaking about these massive migrations. No, they don't speak about this. They speak differently. Now they're speaking, okay, if Putin continues bombing Ukraine and Ukraine can't export the grain, then there will be, again, all these Africans coming massively. So we have to stop the war, because if not, Africans are going to come, massive African migrations are going to come. This is the level of discourse. It's tremendous, it's perverse. So the same question for you. Sorry, because I can't express myself so well in Spanish, because I haven't. Well, we understand you perfectly here. Thank you. Well, the role of media in this context is very strong, because if you're as a newspaper, you speak about the struggle in Ukraine, and you speak about heroes, and you speak about protagonists, about leaders, and then you speak about Syria, and you speak about terrorists, of course, you are going to find solidarity, European solidarity for Ukraine and not for Syria. Because media, the good media, leaves. If good media doesn't cover this, they are leaving space to the other media to cover it with a negative perspective. So in the end, they are not promoting solidarity. For example, when the war in Ukraine started, and the social movements started to go to Poland and bring refugees to Spain, I interviewed a taxi driver and asked him, before the war in Ukraine, there was a humanitarian crisis in Poland with Syrian refugees, with African refugees. Why did a social movement or taxi drivers didn't come here to the border to bring refugees, Syrian refugees, Iraqi refugees to Spain? And he couldn't answer me. Yes. Well, it's the same question for you, Polina. What is the role of media, but also of art? Because I think what is interesting is the response that institutions, art institutions, had with the Ukrainian war, and the difference of this art, the response they had for other wars, other conflicts. So how art institutions responded differently with the Ukrainian war to other wars.
The same as media responded very differently. As a pretext, I must explain that the Ukrainian art scene, it wasn't present anywhere before the war. It just, in Europe or in the US, it was unknown, and actually nobody really was interested. The spike became now, but what I would like to highlight is that, again, I'm sorry, I'm really obsessed about Russian narratives, but one of them is actually trying to divide people. And I could see it in the media, I could see it in Ukraine. Unfortunately, Russian medias were targeting Russian-speaking Ukrainians by spreading false news about migrants in Europe, and actually demonizing migrants in Europe, mainly Muslim, and basically creating them as a backbone of all problems that are happening in Europe. And I have a feeling that they're trying to do it in any way possible, also towards Ukrainians, and trying to put people against each other. I think now is an unprecedented moment where people can support each other and to elevate each other as well. I can see it. I'm really happy to see that my Ukrainian friends, I can't tell for the general public. I don't know it on the country level, but everybody talks about Syria, everybody is talking about Palestine, and in art, actually, there was in art field, there was a horrible event that took place like a month or 2 months ago. I think it was in Germany. There was a representation of Palestinian artists. There were artists from all over the world, and now from Ukraine too. But the Palestinian room, it was vandalized like on daily basis. Like people, unknown people, they would come every day, like artists, they would clean, until one moment when when this room was completely destroyed. And I was so happy to see that my friends, artists, Ukrainian artists, were really talking about it and trying to support. So I think that, I mean, I don't like this idea of being a victim, but also I see it as an opportunity to actually, because we can understand each other in a way, and so we can be together in this. We're in the same boat. I mean, I'm sorry, this was a really horrible thing to say, but it's, yes, we're together, and I hope we will continue to work together.
Add to that. You know, we can talk bad about media in many ways. Just like you see, sometimes media can be opportunity. And it is very disgusting, very bad to say that for myself. But I stayed 7 years in the asylum procedure without getting the paper. The day the Dutch media highlighted the problem of Sierra Leone, there was a bloody killing. That same week, I got my status. I got my stay. So I got my stay behind the death of thousands of people who were slaughtered. And when the Dutch saw that, then they could give me my paper. When I got that paper, I thought, what can I do with this? I got a blood paper, a paper based on the blood of my people. That's why I can. So I was in that traumatic experience of that. You receiving a paper just because they have confirmed thousands of deaths, amputations, slaughtered, and I should get reward. Do you know how that feels? You know? So I could not be happy. 7 years later, getting my status to be a citizen, to be a part of the Dutch system, I could not be happy because I knew every night I sleep, I knew for myself that I got this paper based on those people who were killed. If they were not killed, I should have been back. You know, they should have sent me back to the same war. You know, so media has a role to play, a very important role to play. But sometimes they can play very bad. They can take sides, which sometimes can be destructive for other people and make other people better from it. And I'm a living proof of that. And for artists out in Ukraine, you can see also that this time they give you the honor, raise you up and say, okay, but for how long? For how long?
That is why it's important to use this opportunity to also talk about things that wouldn't be heard otherwise. That's why I think it's a chance to, now that we have a platform, it's wise to use it, not in a selfish way.
Definitely, and I ask because we've seen a lot of new people here who are using social media, other networks, alternative media. For me, the mainstream media, I've given up on it, even though I work for them most of the time, but I've given up sometimes on them. Because we should not rely on them 100%. We should create other means of news. Alternative media, podcasting, let's do a lot to make sure that we own the space, we own the news, so that the mainstream media will go after us. So that is one of the things I would like to give to the audience here, people who are really interested in podcasting, in using alternative media to really own the media. Don't wait for the mainstream media.
9:38.
9:38. We are 8 minutes after time. So I'm going to only to take one question from the audience. Just one question from the audience that we can respond quickly. Here there's one. There's another one. Okay, let's do something. We have the mic there. Please, Ariel, can you help us? So you come here, you ask the question. I love questions, but I hate reflections. This is important. So please, direct questions so that we can respond very quickly.
Very nice. I'm honored to be here. So, being that this should be a chance to use the platforms that is given, not in a selfish way, what would this mean for the other migrant communities that have been here? This is especially to the Ukrainian journalists and artists. What could you do, in a sense, to make sure that these stereotypes that we've seen against black people trying to flee, for instance, Ukraine during the war, would you, for instance, take us along in this uplifting to make sure that we don't feel left out again, that we become allies in a kind of way and not let the fact that we feel left out by Europe and that you are being uplifted be used to divide us? Thank you, that's my question.
Quindi? Dile. Sí.
Vale, mi pregunta es rápida. ¿Creéis?
My question is quick. Do you think there is a relation between journalism and politics? Do you think you're political actors somehow? And Babukar also had a question. We take the three of them.
My question goes to my friend Okba and Mr. Tarawally. For Okba, it is just unfortunate that he was compelled to go into journalism. But I want to ask him, since he's in Madrid here, what differences has he seen in practicing journalism in the war front and being here in Madrid as a practicing journalist? And what is the passionate aspect of his journalism practice? Because we, many journalists, believe that, journalism is a passion in itself. And my question to Mr. Tarawally is that when he mentioned about, the difficulty of being, neutral if something touches you, directly reminds me of Desmond Tutu's, who said, in a situation of injustice, if you want to be neutral, then you have chosen to side with the oppressor. I agree. But I would ask, what would you do with your publications as a person who have survived, these predicaments, to go and launch these books in your country to inspire more people and inject or instill hope in people who think this is the end of life?
¿Yo? No, yo ya estoy de moderador.
I'm the moderator today, so, okay, there were 4 questions. I'm going to distribute them. There are ones that are clearly for Okba and Babah, and the one that has to do with journalism and politics. Maybe, okay, sorry. The one about telling other stories. When you're speaking about refugees, Ukrainian refugees, how can we also be generous and speak about other stories? And for Polina, the question of politics and art. Yes, Marga, it's complicated. It is complicated to change the way that media perceive news, because they think of news in terms of audience. They are not interested in a human point of view. They are interested in the audience they're going to have. Media is perverted completely, and now we only think we see a screen in which we see how many people are reading each news and how minutes they stay in each news, and we manage, we see this news and we decide which ones we promote depending on the audience they have, depending on the clicks they have, depending on how many people are reading them. So be it an earthquake, a volcano, or COVID, you read it at the beginning and then you disconnect. So what is important is not only to have good journalists, but to have good people in the newsrooms. We need a humanity that is above statistics. We need, obviously, we need subscriptions, but the subscriptions don't come from news that everybody reads because it's what people are speaking about. Subscriptions come because we are speaking about relevant news, important news, but we don't want to invest in this type of news, and this is the problem. Fortunately, we still have ways of speaking about all these stories. We were saying this before, not only in mainstream media, but also outside mainstream media. Now anyone can create a podcast. We can tweet. We can speak about all these migrations. And in fact, what happened recently with the massacre in Melilla, if we didn't have all this network of tweets of people that suddenly started to do journalism somehow. If this didn't happen, people wouldn't have asked Pedro Sanchez why did he said what he said, why did he and it is because sometimes politicians listen to people, or at least read people, and suddenly they realize they made an error and they were speaking from their own perspectives. So suddenly newsrooms are made up of people, of a variety of people, and they listen to what is happening also. Polina.
Politics.
Sí, ¿no?
Is
there a relation between?
Definitely, and I would say that if there is no relation to it, it is actually a relation, because it just lets some policies slide without being noticed. Because especially I think modern art, its idea is to make people critical and to question things. And that's the difference with the media, because media gives you answers to questions. It doesn't provoke you to think. I mean, I guess good journalism and, I'm sorry, I'm not very good with terms, but some articles are made to do it, but mainly mainstream, it's just there as you would look out of the window. While art is supposed to be something that provokes you. And I think that often governments are instrumentalizing it, especially we can see it in Russia. All agencies, they can use the instrumentalize. And actually, talking about media, you all know Hermitage Museum, probably in St. Petersburg. And the director of this museum that is worldwide known, he gave an interview about the relation of art to special operation, that's how they call the war in Ukraine. And he said that art is their special operation, that when Russia attacked Ukraine, there were flags of Russian artists in all major art institutions in Paris, like Moroz collection. There was another artist who is actually retrospective, who's actually Ukrainian, but he was represented as Russian. Anyway, what I'm saying is that what many people don't realize, especially when they admire art, is that it's soft power. It's called soft power because that's how some countries use it as a cover to the crimes, because people don't perceive certain states as predators. They just admire the culture they produce, and I think it can be deceptive. But again, sometimes it's made on purpose, sometimes it's just artists are being used. Yeah, it's a good question, thank you.
Rápido, responded cada uno.
Really quickly, please.
Reacting to Mr. Cisse, the question. For me, I have got a lot of experience in, like in Holland, where we have a lot of demonstrations, racism demonstrations against Black Pete, for example. We have the Black Pete in Holland. If you don't know about Black Pete, I don't know, I think most of you all know about Black Pete. And every year in December, we have demonstrations against Black Pete. So most of my friends, colleagues, and Black people, we go to demonstrate very peacefully. Sometimes they will cover their mouths with plasters and hold their hands and just to demonstrate very peacefully. So I'm always part of that demonstration, but I am not taking part as a demonstrant. I don't demonstrate, I don't hold my hands, because in those type of situations, you have to have a journalist that knows the background of the people who are demonstrating. So people ask me, Babah, why don't come and join us? I said, no, I have to be here to write about the news, to write about it from my own perspective. Because my journalism should also be a journalism for the marginalized, who are not heard. Because there are a lot of white Dutch journalists there present. They write from their own point of departure. They always write from their own audience. Like what you said, the audience, for media, the audience is very important. I'm going to say this. Sometimes I compare media just like McDonald's. The burger is not very healthy, but there is always consumers who comes and buy it. They know it's not healthy, but they buy it. So media, they know who they are looking to. There are people that sit in the villages, looking the news, and they are precisely being targeted. So even in Holland, we have like one television program they call Opsporing Gezocht. It's a program about criminality in Holland. And guess, 90% of the people you see are Black people. Because the cameras of these people, they go on holidays. When their house is broken in, when they come, they send their videos to the television company. And most of them who send their videos to the television company, because there is a Black person who came to their house and stole. So this major canal shows the Dutch audience, 90% you see are Black people. So when you watch it from your village, you see Black person coming, you're always afraid. Because the media has more than 10, 15, 20 years, they have been indoctrinated these people that the Black person is a criminal. So you see how media operates. Because I've written a column about that. This television program is one of the programs that is responsible for the stereotype against Black people. Of course, there are a lot of criminality is not only for race, certain race. We have the big tech criminals, the white criminals who are, they are there. Concentrate on them. Why every time these small petty criminals, they thief something because they want to eat, or something, not very small thing, and they put it on television, make it big. So that gives me anger. And that makes me to also react on that way. So when Mr. Cisse mentioned that question, I was thinking, I have a position to play. In my journalism, I will always make sure I protect the marginalized. Of course, we have our own problems. But the people who are talking about those problems, they are in the majority. So it's not my task to highlight those problems that is happening in our community. I know it happens. Sometimes we have problems, but I'm not there to talk about it because there are more than 95% of the journalists who are talking about it. So how can you expect me from my own, as a Black man living in Holland in a minority, to be only talking about the bad things Black people do? So when I write, I only write about what white people are doing, the bad things they are doing. So I don't see myself as a journalist, I see myself as an activist journalist who is also pointing out the fault of the white people. And they get me, of course, I have a lot of threats. They write letters threatening me, but I don't care because I also have to have that mouth and that opinion. I have the podium, so I make use of it.
Y Okba, para terminar, respuesta.
Okba, please, a short response in order to finish. Well, Boubacar, your question has a long answer, but I'm going to try and summarize it. Journalism is complicated everywhere. You need brave journalists. In Syria, it's really complicated because You are in a war covering your situation, the situation of your family, the situation of your village, of your people, the situation of your country. And also, there is this cultural shock. Here the problems are cultural shock, racism, etc. That is why we create Beinar, which is a media created by racialized journalists in order to create an objective image of migration. This is the short answer. Thank you, Okba. And we close with this. Thank you so much. Tomorrow there is an activity at 7:30, a meme battle, an anti-racist meme battle. We will be here tomorrow. And thank you so much to everybody. Please, an applause for everyone. Thank you so much.
Is your book available in English?
Some of them, not all. All my books are in Dutch. But I write